Hello and good morning, friends. Today I want to take you with me on an inspection for a house from 1968. Now, this home was held by the original owner. It looks like they've taken good care of it, but nobody knows when that septic system was last touched. So we get to play the fun game of see what's there, is it working, is it not working, and what needs to be fixed. Before we do that, though, we got to make sure we take a look at the county records, see what the county thinks is on the property, and then we're going to go take a look outside and see what's actually on the property. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the original permit. So we can see here that in 1968, they wanted to put a 750-gallon tank to a single trench that's 75 feet long, 10 feet deep, 2 feet wide. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that in the video, I had not had a chance to look over these, so you're going to hear me kind of get some of these dates and some of these times incorrect. However, we end up in the same ballpark at the end. So this is the original system. So we know that it should have been a 750 tank to a 75-foot trench. Now, in 2013 and 14 is when the permit was executed, they installed a 1250 tank. Now we can see here that there's no mention of it being a two-chamber system. Very common for that area, basically just to have to put in a tank, but not actually have to say if it's a two-chamber or a one-chamber. Modern systems are gonna have that delineation. So they would have replaced this because of a failure in the existing system. Not the end of the world, but we should see that size tank outside. Now, they didn't make any mention of a new drain field, just the tank. So we fully anticipate seeing the 75-foot trench right off the back of the system. So we're gonna go back outside and we're gonna take a look to see what's actually in the ground. So we can see here that we have our tank with a riser in the front, another riser in the back, and based off the records, we should have a single tank to a trench somewhere over yonder. Now, this tank does not look to be what would originally have been installed on this property, and the reason why is if we look in here, we can see those plastic baffles right there, right? So we got one in the front, middle, and back of the tank. So two-chamber tanks were very common nowadays, right? Since basically 2014. Every modern septic system, you're gonna get a two-chamber tank, whether you want one or not. Now, the county records did not imply that there was a two-chamber tank on this property, so that means somebody's replaced this system at some point in the past. Now, based off of the type of baffle that's in there, I would speculate mid-2000s to 2010s, give or take, right? So these baffles are very prone to falling off, and the reason why is they're just bolted to the walls. The bolts will basically rot out, and the baffle will fall off, and it just won't do its job. So I usually recommend whenever you have those kind of baffles, just spend a little bit of extra money. Get a proper Schedule 40 sanitary tee with PVC in there, so that way once it's glued in, you don't got to worry about it falling off. So we can look at these risers and we can see that the concrete's got some degradation to it. And I'm not entirely sure what happened to one of the lids, but let me show you why something's going on. So we can see here that there's a crack forming right on the top of the lid, and you can see all those chips and damages to the edges of this riser lid, as well as to the riser itself. So we're gonna recommend that they go ahead and replace it, but usually something like this, you have to hit it kind of hard. Been that maybe they hit it with a lawnmower, maybe a truck, who knows what happened to it, but it is damaged, and with the riser basically being what prevents kids from falling in, yes, there's a safety lid, but you know, it's a couple feet down. We don't wanna have a kid fall through that and get hurt. So we're gonna recommend that that lid get replaced. I always recommend as a homeowner, just every few months, just walk out there, take a look. Does everything look normal? Is everything where it belongs? Do the lids look like they're in decent shape? Are they starting to crack, break, etc.? And if they are, go ahead and replace them. So while we have these lids open, the next step, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a look inside with a mirror, all right? Make sure all the baffles are there. We can see the front and the back baffle, but we gotta see if that wall baffle's in place. While we're doing that, we're gonna go ahead and start running some water through everything. The reason we wanna run water is to make sure that everything is draining the way that it's supposed to drain. The term we use for this is a hydraulic load. Basically, it's to test to make sure that nothing's surfacing and everything's draining out correctly in the drain fields. Now, whenever you have a property transfer in Maryland, it is a required thing to do. Unless, of course, obviously it's backing up and surfacing, then you don't do that because you don't want to have sewage going into the house. From there, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our camera and we're gonna toss the camera through the pipes. So I'm gonna take a look, see what we're working with underground, and I'll be right back with you in a second. So we've run the camera through the pipes, and it definitely looks like they left some of the original sewer line in place. It's cast iron, but then it transitions to PVC. Now, the thing with cast iron that you have to make sure you pay attention to is that as it ages, it kind of gets brittle, and on top of that, it starts to do what's called pitting. Basically, that's rusting. And what will happen is, as that pipe rusts, it creates little bits of texture. And that little bit of texture will capture debris. And over the course of many years, that debris will eventually build up until you have a clog. Or if you're flushing stuff that you're not supposed to be flushing, such as flushable wipes, feminine products, plastics, cigarette butts, anything like that, you run a higher risk of those things getting caught up in the pipe and causing a clog. Now, everybody will have a sewer line in the house to deal with stuff like that, but this particular sewer line looks a little bit rough. So let's go look at the one in the house so I can explain to you why it's important to make sure that you keep on top of things and make sure you have a good access to all of your systems within the home. So we can actually see here, this is the sewer stack in the home. So we have all of our old school copper piping going to this cast iron clean out. Now you can see how it's all gnarly like that, and you see that little bit of blue. That's the brass cap corroding and the piping itself corroding. Now, somebody at some point has painted this, so we don't know exactly how bad it truly is, but whenever you start to see your pipes do that, it's a good idea to go ahead and replace that preemptively. Otherwise, you're gonna have a problem when it comes time to take off that lid in case you get a clog. So we know what we're working with on the inside stuff, and for the main sewer line, let's take a look on the outlet side and see where those drain fields go. The camera we're going to be using today is going to be my rigid sea snake. And so basically the benefit of this camera is that on the end of the head is going to be a radio transponder to where I can run it through the pipe and see where it goes. Now, when we ran the camera, we got to right around where this ball is, about 3.5 feet below the surface before we hit an obstruction. So basically the pipe is going to go as solid pipe, transition directly into the drain field. And right here, about 3 feet from that transition point, we have a blockage. That blockage could be literally anything, but it looks like a combination of dirt and roots. Usually when that happens, it means we had a pipe failure. Now, I don't know exactly when this was done or what the history of the home is. It's possible that somebody drove over it, could have just been a bad install, could have just been a manufacturer defect, but we know the pipe's not open, we know that it's not draining the way it's supposed to drain. So how do you fix that? Basically, the next step is you come over with a machine, dig that area up, remove the broken pipe, dig out as far as you can to make sure all the other pipes look good, and then put it back together. Sometimes this involves permits. In our area, the county wants anything over 10 foot to be permitted. In your area, it might be a little bit different. What we do know though is in 2013, when they did the tank, they connected to the original existing system. So more than likely, it's just that really old pipe just gave up the ghost. And unfortunately now we have to do the repiping. So this is why it's very important to make sure whenever you're purchasing a home, renovating a home, doing any kind of additions to a house, that you take a look to see what kind of infrastructure is already in the ground and is it currently working the way that it's supposed to work. In this particular circumstance, the tank looks great. The sewer line in the house doesn't look so good. The sewer line exiting the tank looks great until it transitions to the old piping, and then it doesn't look so good. If you don't run a camera through these pipes, you would never know that any of this stuff's happening. And in my opinion, it's worth every penny. Some places might charge a lot more, some places may not, but just make sure as a prospective purchaser, as a homeowner, as anybody who wants to deal with housing, take a look at that sort of stuff. It's important. It's, in my opinion, just as important as the home inspection, because you got to make sure you can get rid of your wastewater. Otherwise, you're going to have poo water in your basement, and nobody wants that. With these older houses, you never really know exactly what you're going to be getting when you come into the property. Fortunately, this tank has been replaced in 2013. Now, unfortunately, they left the old original absorption system connected to the piping from the new tank. So they got some problems, right? Generally, when we advise people, most tanks in our area usually will last roughly 60 to 80 years, give or take. If it's a plastic tank, they don't usually last as long. I find so many issues with plastic tanks, so concrete is what you want, right? The absorption system, on the other hand, that's usually where you get roughly 30 or 40 years. So based off the county paperwork, the drain field should be from the 1960s. However, you know, if it was an old person living here, which is kind of what it looks like, they're not going to be running as much water. So that might be why they've never noticed this problem in the past. Older people tend to use less water, right? A younger family of 4 with 2 children that are itty bitties, they're going to use a lot more water. And because of that, they're going to be putting a lot more stress on a septic system. So if you have a problem like this, where you have a blockage or a collapsed pipe, as an older person, you may not ever notice because you're not really running enough water to cause it to fill up and back up towards the tank. As we were introducing water into the system, you could see the water level slowly starting to creep up and up and up. That's only because they had about 2 foot of drain field that was actually working. Now, 2 foot is not really going to get the job done. Usually you want to see a lot more than that. The minimum size that we'll see in our area is 30 foot if you have really good soil, up to about 100 foot. The county doesn't really let you go past 100 feet because you could run into the same issue down the road and you put all that trench in and you can't use it. The only county who seems to do that style would be Montgomery County, which they no longer do, but we would refer to that as a serial distribution, where basically you would have one drain field go out, down, back over, and it would just kind of snake back on itself. Not a great way of doing it. Nowadays we use drain fields or just a straight single trench right off the back of the tank. So this particular one has a few problems, right? But that's why you want to make sure you have everything looked at when you're purchasing your home. If you go on the internet, Google it, right? The Google machine does all sorts of things. If you Google contractors in your area, a variety of people will offer these services, right? I always recommend, if you're going to have somebody take a look at your septic system, have them run a camera through the sewer line, have them run a camera into the drain field just to see what's going on, right? A lot of your issues are going to be between the house and the tank because the pipe could be messed up. It could be cast iron. It could have a bunch of roots. It could have all sorts of shenanigans going on in there that can cause you a lot of headaches as a homeowner. So running a camera through the sewer line makes it a lot simpler for you to know what you're working with and anticipate or repair whatever might be going on. If you don't, you might have a nasty surprise at 2 in the morning one day when you have sewage in your basement, right? Nobody wants that at all. If you gained any value out of this, if you found this informative in any way, hit that like button, hit subscribe. I have more videos posted every day on the Water Well and Septic, and I look forward to talking to you guys tomorrow.